And about the most interesting thing you can see is how bloated those bellies are. It's absolutely incredible how much meat they can cram into their stomachs. And I'm certainly not envious of their position that they're in right now.
I think we need to send James for a little walk down in the bottom here.
Exactly. I wonder what they could have fed on, Craig. Because a fully grown buffalo is surely too much for them to finish off in one sitting, yet they're all very full-bellied. It will be a mystery.
Like I say, I think we should send James down into
Do you
the
think
bottom.
they've still got more meat? Possibly.
Yeah, and it's been a few days since I've seen them. They've been in relatively thick blocks. We've had other lions around. So I've left them for a few days, and not a bad way to find them.
No, not at all.
Well, he's lying right at the back.
Now, I'm not too sure. The initial update that we got this morning said that there was 2 big males, so that could have been misinformation, or the 2 big males could have splintered off in another direction. So that is one question that I'm asking myself as we sit here, because that also certainly would have played a big role in whatever they did catch and feed on last night. If there was 2 big males that were also feeding with this pride, it would have increased the amounts of meat that they can consume for obvious reasons. Okay, well, I've just got some clarification on what I've just been discussing regarding those 2 big male lions. Apparently, there was an update from the Zumi Terran sent through about 4 hours ago, and Tammy saw 1 lioness coming down to drink at around 4:15 a.m. So maybe that was where the confusion came from.
No, there's 2 males and 6 females have crossed over into Malo Malo.
Okay.
From other little Gari orphans.
Okay. I'm quite surprised to see a little bit more action from these lions, so this is a pleasant surprise. And it really is interesting, their behavior. They were all passed out, and then in just an instant, for no apparent reason, this one lioness has decided to get up and move, and now the rest of the pride are looking on, wondering whether they should follow or not. And I believe a lot of the viewers out there are amazed at how full-bellied these lions are, and it really does go to show that they need to make the most of whatever opportunities they get, and when the going's good they make the most of it, because they can go for days without catching their next prey. especially at this time of the year when they don't have much cover, and a lot of the vegetation that they're stalking through is so dry and crunchy that it makes a very loud noise as they try and sneak up on their prey. But I agree with you, it's absolutely phenomenal how much they can squeeze into their bellies. It looks like Junior, who is the young male at the back, has managed to get more into his stomach than any of the others, and his belly seems to be protruding considerably more than the others. And there's a few reasons for that. He's big and strong and still growing, and he would have been able to outcompete the rest of the pride and get into the easiest parts of the carcass to feed on, and that way get the most of the easy cuts, you could say.
They do look uncomfortable.
Well, we've just got a question through from Jennifer. Good morning and welcome on board with us. Jennifer's interested to know about this young male lion and whether he's been chased away by his fathers, or if there's been any animosity shown towards him, because it is quite strange that a male of his age is still with his family pride. And you're right, Jennifer, it is fairly surprising that he is still tolerated in his home pride, with his natal pride rather. And there have been one or two circumstances that we've been aware of in the last few months where his fathers have shown a little bit of animosity towards him, and they have actually chased him away, but he then just returns back to the pride once his fathers have moved off. But it certainly will get to a point where they will no longer tolerate him, and those days are soon approaching. I think with any time within the next few months we could all of a sudden stop seeing him, and he's going to move off and try and create a life for himself, which he's going to be up against a long and windy road. Because he is on his own, he doesn't have any brothers that he can move off with. It's going to mean that the odds are kind of stacked quite heavily against him, but only time will tell, and it'll be interesting to see whether he is successful or not. Well, I think it's safe to say that these lion are going to spend the rest of the day here, and we can come back this afternoon and see what they're up to. I'm guessing they will probably head back to the Djuma waterhole for another drink, and then probably continue sleeping. They could spend the next 24 hours in this area, and it wasn't too long ago that they actually did make a kill nearby and then did spend 24 hours relaxing and digesting their ballooned stomachs. Well, we've just got a question through from Katidid, which is a name that I have yet to hear, so I'm guessing you could be a new viewer, so welcome on board with us. And Katidid would like to know why there is no father figure or male lion that is with this pride, as she was under the impression, or he was under the impression, I'm not sure whether you are a boy or a girl, Katydid. Your name is a bit misleading with regards to that. But Katydid is under the impression that lions will have a harem of females, and that is not the case. It's more common for one male lion or a coalition of male lions to actually have a territory which encompasses several prides, and those males will typically move around alone or with the other males, making sure that there's no other threats or other males trying to sneak into their territory, and they'll only join up with the lioness and the prides when there is food or mating opportunities. So more often than not, in this area, in the Sabi Sands, your prides of lion will not have male lions in attendance with them, unless, like I say, there's an easy meal that the males will be cashing in on, or the opportunities to mate. So that's also the case with a lot of the animals. One animal that I can think of that has a harem structure is a zebra. So the zebra male will fight off other males and compete throughout the year for his females, and he'll never leave their side. Whereas lions aren't the case, and most other male animals out here will only spend time with females when it actually suits them, and that is most often when there's a mating opportunity, or possibly when there's an easy meal to cash in on. Thanks for sending your question through though, Katydid, and good to have you with us. Running around here at Djuma because I feel that there could be a lot more excitement elsewhere, and by us being stuck here, we could be missing out on something else that's going on. And I think it'll make sense for us to return here this afternoon, a little bit later on, when we get to see them a little bit more active, and possibly to get to see them drinking. Craig, thank you, sir. Cheers, everyone. It's a good question, eh? I'm not too sure. Where do you want to go?
I'm going to stop somewhere for a cup of Java.
Okay.
That's about it.
Okay.
I've got planned.
Okay, cool, Craig. Well, enjoy that. And we will see you later.
Might have an extra cup or two.
That's very kind. Thank you. So Craig kindly invited us to join him for a cup of coffee, and it's very civilized out here on safari. The guides will stop with their guests in the morning and evening drive. In the morning, typically, you'll have a coffee or a tea, but in the evening, gin and tonics and beers are quite popular. Having said that, though, it's not uncommon for guests to enjoy an amarula coffee in the morning, which is a delicious liqueur. There's a pretty bird which has just landed in front of us. You may have seen a flash of blue, and it flew down to try and catch an insect, which I think it did do. I'm just going to reposition. It's flown up into a tree, and already we've got some action as we left those sleepy lions. I'm hoping this lilac-breasted roller is going to let us get nice and close. Ooh, this is going to be good. And it's still busy trying to finish off whatever it's caught there. Or has it got a piece of grass stuck in its mouth? Yeah, it looks like it's got a piece of grass caught in the mix. And I think it swallowed that involuntarily as it gobbled up the insect that it caught. Isn't that a beautiful bird? I'm interested to see what it's going to do with this blade of grass, because there we go. No luck. it appears to have swallowed a portion of it, I think, along with the insect that it ate, and that's why it's not looking too comfortable at the moment. It's like swallowing a long piece of spaghetti and having half in your mouth and the other half dangling out of it. It is not a situation you'd want to find yourself in. Well, it seems to have surprisingly come to terms with this new accessory. Alright, here we go. Come on, Mr. Roller, rid yourself of that blade of grass. It's actually really interesting. You can see a few very small pieces of mud almost on the end of its beak, where it must have pierced into the earth after this insect, probably a grasshopper. Oh. Well, we'll never know the end of that story, but interesting nonetheless. So there's quite a few of you that are interested to know the composition and number of animals in this pride. I believe Safari and Elizabeth have both sent through similar questions. And good morning and welcome on board with us. There's 8 lions in the Nkuhuma pride, one of which is the young male, who's probably around 3.5 years of age now. Then there's 2 smaller sub-adults, which are probably over a year now, coming on a 1.5 years, I'm guessing. And then the rest are all fully grown lioness. So that would mean 5 adult lioness, but of varying stages of adulthood. 2 of which are noticeably older. To try and follow them for as long as possible. It's a little bit bumpy here, so hold on. What a morning it's been. I hope you've all been enjoying it as much as we have. And it's so good to have you on board with us. And again, huge thank yous to all of the updates that you sent through earlier to help us to get to see these lions. If we had have been 2 minutes later, we wouldn't have seen any of the action that we got to see as we arrived at the sighting, and all we would have seen were the full-bellied sleepy cats. I'm glad we got into position when we did. We're just approaching at the dam now, so we should in the next moments or 2 have a view of these hyena. Awesome, they're still here. And I'm guessing that they would have been trying to clean up the scraps and remains from whatever it was these lions killed. If there was remains of the kill of a substantial portion, the lions would have returned to the kill. So it makes me confident that the lions finished off as much as they needed to, or much as they could comfortably feed on, and only left a few scraps and bones for these hyena. Even judging by the hyenas' bellies, it doesn't look like they've had lots to feed on. At this time of the year, as the water dries up, the animals can find it difficult to find a good place to drink from, because it can be very muddy on the periphery of the water's edge. And it looks like these hyena are just trying to find a harder patch of ground that leads up to the water's edge that will allow them to drink a bit more easily. There's a few blacksmith lapwings fluttering through the shot that you would have seen. Now an Egyptian goose in the foreground. It could be that they're also simply following the scent of the lion. They've lost it now because they're heading in the wrong direction, but it's not uncommon for hyena to follow the scent of lion and leopard, with the knowledge that when they do eventually catch up with them, there could be some food. And this is great to see how hyena are animals of endurance. They cover huge distances, and it's often in that slow trot that you can see them disappearing off now. And this allows them to not only search for easy meals, but also hunt down prey for themselves. Interesting that they have headed in that direction. I'm guessing that they could be members from a different clan, not the clan where we see denning, which is behind us. And I was hoping that they were going to be members of that same clan, because then they would have possibly taken us back there for a meeting with the family, possibly next time, or possibly they are the members of that clan and they've just moved den sites. Thanks very much for that, Craig. Good morning, Kay in Wisconsin, and welcome on board. Kay is interested to know, will the lioness tolerate dominant feeding behavior from Junior, the young male? And it's not whether they will tolerate it or not. They don't have an option, sadly, Kay. Because he is bigger and stronger than them now, he simply outcompetes them. And it'll be the same even for within the lioness and the pride. The biggest and strongest lioness will fight her way into the best feeding position. So even though they can be loving and affectionate when there's no food around, as soon as a kill is made, they will all fight fiercely amongst one another to get into the best spots. Now, that leads to another portion of Kay's question, and that was whether he will actually help in the hunt. And yes, he certainly will, especially in bringing down bigger prey. So when it comes to the larger animals where the pride will need a bit more help, and where he will have time to drag his lazy bones from the back of the pride or the back of the action into whatever's going on, yes, he certainly will help out. But in the scenarios where the pride are hunting smaller prey that can often be brought down quite quickly, I'm sure he's going to be trailing too far behind to even lend a hand, and he'll just come in and steal whatever food, well, not steal, but yeah, essentially help himself to the spoils of the kill that he wasn't really involved in. The clouds are very interesting today. They've been blanketing over and blowing over and coming backwards and forwards, so a combination of clouds and blue sky this morning. It'll be interesting to see how the day turns out, but I'm enjoying a bit of cloud cover. It's not hugely common at this time of year. Oh, you may have just seen the one Birchall starling bullying another one. And flew down and bomb dived. One of its fellow species. There's always a host of birds which enjoy searching for food here in the quarantine clearings. So we're just going to continue and see if we can get into a good spot where we can enjoy sightings of a few more birds. There have been crowned plovers which have successfully raised a few hatchlings. And I'm just checking to see if this crowned lapwing that we can see, which is the bird on the top left of your screen, doesn't have any chicks running alongside it. I can't see any. And I noticed a few chicks just before I went on leave 2 weeks ago, so I'm hoping there's still a few chicks around. Like most baby animals, the first few weeks of their life are when they are most vulnerable, and often adults will lose young. No chicks evident here, but it could be that they have hidden down in the grass. They're exceptionally well camouflaged, and their number one method of escaping is simply to lie completely flat in the grass. One of my favorite birds is up ahead, so it seems like the birds are going to be entertaining us for the next few moments. Just going to try and get us into a good position. This is not the best, but it'll do for now. There's some helmeted guinea fowl searching for food. They are mostly youngsters. I can tell that because the crest on their head, which is a keratin bulge, they're all very small. So this all, oh no, there's one adult in and amongst them which we'll be able to show you, but the one that you've just seen there was a youngster, so it would have hatched in November or December last year. But there is one adult which has got a much bigger keratin crest and also a blue face. So I'm just going to try and reposition ever so slightly. And that way we'll be able to get a better view of them. We'll be able to see the difference between adults and youngsters. That should do. They're really comical little birds, these. And now you can see the comparison between the adults and the youngsters. The adults have got the bright blue head and the large keratin crest or helmet, whereas the youngsters aren't quite there yet. And they'll be feeding on grass, seeds, small insects, and they often use their feet to scratch through the undergrowth and reveal little morsels to feed on. Very similar to a chicken. And look at how incredibly patterned they are with those tiny little white spots on their feathers. They've got really awesome coloration and patternings. Hard to believe that not too long ago we saw a Verreaux's eagle owl, a very large owl which had managed to kill a guinea fowl. And that would have been a very substantial meal for that bird. But sadly for the guinea fowl, they are high up on a lot of the predators' menus, especially the birds of prey. Great. I can't resist this, so we're going to spend a bit more time with them because they are such cool little animals, and they were at one stage looking like they may continue towards us, but now they've all turned away and headed in the opposite direction. Well, good morning to Kiffy in Cape Town. Very happy to hear that you've tuned in. For those of you who are new to the show, Kiffy is Nikki's father, and very happy to have him on board with us this morning. He's interested to know where I have picked up my knowledge of the wilderness, and for example of the harem question that came up earlier regarding the lion and how lion males will compete for females and how they will operate within certain areas and cover not one pride but often several prides at a time. And Kiffy, over the years we have shared secrets and stories amongst guides, but initially it started off here in the Sabi Sands, my training, and over the years a combination of sharing thoughts with other guides and also reading textbooks, you come to work out exactly what your thoughts and opinions are on the various animals and what they do, because you can often find there's no set rule for any given animal, and often dynamics will change from one area in Africa to another, even though the same animal may be, or the same species of animal may be being researched or looked at. But Kiffy, good to have you on board with us, and I hope you're enjoying the safari. Well, the guinea fowl all disappeared, so we shall continue and see what else is happening out here. It seems like the bush is coming to life now that it has cooled down, warmed up a bit. And the birds are certainly out and about and beginning to chatter a little bit more, and the temperature's a lot more pleasant. than it was for the first couple of hours. Just got a question through from Lucy in Columbus. Morning, Lucy. And Lucy would like to know if we know who the father of Junior could be. Junior is the young male lion that we saw a little bit earlier with the Nkuhuma pride. And yes, Lucy, we've got a very good idea as to who the father could be. It will be one of the Matimba males. So probably one of two males in a coalition that we still see around here. And the reason why we can very safely assume that they are the fathers is that they haven't killed him and they have tolerated him. If they weren't his father, they would have killed him when he was much younger, in that way releasing his mother of his responsibility of raising him, of the responsibility of raising him, and that way they would have been able to get their genes into the system. And that's common with both lion and leopard and cheetah. If any male of those three species comes across young cubs that are not their own, they will kill them. And that's how Mother Nature ensures only the strongest and best genes are carried through ecosystems at any given point of time. And that helps us to assume that the Matimba males are his father. Interestingly enough, they'll be the same males who eventually chase him off when the time comes, and as we have discussed, that could happen very soon. Just got some more interesting information through from Chris on Twitter. Thanks very much for sending this through, Chris. And when one lioness from the Nkuhuma pride was seen at around 4:15 a.m. this morning drinking at the waterhole, she was already full-bellied. So I think we can safely assume that the lion therefore made the kill in the earlier hours of the evening. Who knows, possibly moments after we left them at the end of the broadcast last night. Hard to tell. We couldn't share anything from camp. We had no idea that the kill had been made, otherwise we of course would have headed there first thing in the morning. But thanks very much for sending that info through, Chris, and it's great trying to piece together the puzzle of what may have happened. Even though we'll never know exactly what it may be, we can use pieces of information like what Chris has just given us to try and best understand what happens when we are tucked up in our beds. Incredible how much the bush has continued to dry out and thin out in the 2 weeks that I've been gone. We can continue to expect that for the next few months, basically until October or November, which is when we will expect our next decent rain. We may get the odd downpour between now and then, but not enough to contribute to any major growth. And it's going to make life easier for us because we can see further into the bush. So I'm certainly enjoying the change, but the herbivores aren't going to be nearly as happy as we are with the drying conditions, as it basically means there's less food around for them. But it is a natural cycle to have a drought every kind of 5 to 7 years in this area, or drought conditions. And these drought conditions will allow the predators a moment where they can capitalize on weaker prey and that certainly will help animals, especially like the Styx pride, for example, with their 2 young cubs. Those cubs have been born at a great time where, in all likelihood, there's going to be a bounty of easy meals as the herbivores weaken due to lack of nutrition. So as those 3 little cubs are bound to get a very good kickstart to their life. Well, thanks very much for joining in with that epic lion sighting that we've just had. And I'm sure a lot of you have been wondering what James is up to and what he has been up to since you've been with me. So let's go over to him and get an update, and we'll catch up with you a little bit later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Djuma. We find ourselves in the far southwestern sector, eastern sector of the reserve. We have bashed through bush. I've torn Brian's clothing to shreds, all in the vain hopes of finding something dead. And the reason is we've been following that juvenile batelier that you can see on your picture. Now, he was in the company of some rather ominous-looking hooded vultures, which we saw yesterday. Well, I don't know if they were the same ones, but possibly. And batelier often eat carrion. They're often the first to a kill, after the thing that's killed, of course. And then they're followed by the hooded vultures, and then the bigger vultures. But Brian and I have done an extensive search of the area and failed to come up with anything. So we thought we'd just show you this rather magnificent bird. Now, the adult batelier, of course, is not brown at all like that one. He's black, or he and she are both black, with beautiful red sort of face mask, which I shall share you a photograph of just now. But he looks like he's going to fly. Every time the wind comes up, he looks like he might take off. But the most interesting thing, of course, is that the batelier, that one specifically, is probably I'm guessing at about a 3-year-old. They live to 40, but they take 7 years to reach their adult plumage. Now, during those 7 years, each molt, their tail gets progressively shorter and shorter, because when they're adults, at 7 years, they fly with almost no tail at all. And it is so difficult to fly with no tail that it takes 7 years for them to reach the stage where they can learn to where they have learnt to fly with no tail. So it gets shorter and shorter each time, and by the time they're 7, there's almost no tail at all as they fly. So he's got a little tail, and he's looking at something. I don't know what it is, but you know, on a day like this when the wind is a bit off and it's cold, birds like that don't like to fly too much because it's difficult for them in the absence of thermals, and this cold wind will blow them. Well, it doesn't blow them off course, but it makes it difficult to circle in one place. You kind of got to tack against the wind. There's just a lot more effort unless there's something really worthwhile. A stunning young bird, that. I believe you've been having a marvelous time looking at the Nkuhuma pride. Just before you left me last, we just spotted some tracks, and I'm pretty sure that the animals you've been watching would have turned up at the end of the tracks that we found. They were from early last night, and it seems that they have murdered something hapless during the course of the night and finished it. And yet again, it's interesting to me as we talk about the demise of animals while looking at a carrion-eating batelier. It's been interesting to me how the Nkuhuma pride seems, in the 5 weeks that I've been here today, they don't kill large animals, or they don't often. Apparently they have killed hippo before, and some giraffe and sometimes buffalo, but since I've been here, they probably do what most lions do, which is kill something probably like an impala or a young kudu, finish it quickly in the night, and then move on. And I think that that's probably more common than we think it is. I think impala and small antelope probably make up the bulk of the diet. And then when we do see them on giraffe and buffalo or hippo, it's a much more unusual occurrence. All right, so we're just going to show you, there were some monkeys alarm calling off to where that battalier is looking, but well sort of out of range from what I can see. They're quite a long way away. I'm just going to show you a picture of the adult battalier. Then we're going to carry on towards where those monkeys were alarm calling, and then we'll see what else we can see. So there you can see the adult. There's beautiful his and hers red face mask, and the juveniles tend to be something like that, and that one there is basically what we're seeing, and you'll get variations of all of them. That's a bit older, that juvenile, you can see getting a slightly red face and even shorter tail. That is the battalier eagle, beautiful bird. Okay, right, well I think we'll press gently along and see if we can't find what those monkeys were alarm calling at just now. And otherwise, we'll go back to the lions at some stage. I believe they are now doing what the Nkuhuma pride seems to do best, which is go to sleep. Oh, I did want to show you something. Brian, did we lose our rope? Oh, here we go. Brian and I, while we were stopped listening to the sounds of the bush and seeing if we could pick up where the alarm calls were going and where those vultures were landing, we made some rope. Now, as I said to Brian, we're not about to go and rig a frigate for Drake's voyage or anything like that with this sort of rope, but it is pretty strong stuff, and I'll show you the bush it's made of. It's quite efficient. There we go. Plaited from the tree Gruvia flava, and this is Gruvia flava. And you can see from where we've taken the bark, and that is actually, Brian and I were not just horsing about, although we do some of that. This is actually what the tree used to be used for, and it still is in some areas. Some people, especially kids, if they're hungry, and often in these areas, you know, protein is a very scarce resource, and kiddies, and they're on holiday, they don't go off to the mall or to the cinema or things like that. They go into the bush and they try and find fun things to do, and if there's a small meal in the end of that fun, then that's what they'll do. And they'll make much more competent rope than the one that Brian and I put together. I think Brian's is that one. Mine is too much of an embarrassment for me to show you. But they make much finer twine. You can make very thin rope out of this tree. It's called a Gruvia flava, like I say. I think the velvet raisin is its common name. And then they use the twine to make little snares for birds, for francolins. And in the rural areas out here, when the cattle lands, the francolins are still around, and they set little traps, amazingly clever and intricate traps, with this sort of rope. Nothing as crude as that, but with very fine rope made from this tree. And then if they're lucky enough, they catch a francolin or two, go and cook it over an open fire for lunch. And that's a good way to spend your day, probably a much healthier way than some of the kids in the Western world spend their holidays. All right, on we go. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to keep your rope and toss this out. Hello, Donna. Talking of catching birds, ground birds to eat, you've apparently looked at some guinea fowl with Scott, and where you would be able to catch one with one of those ropes, not the ones that Brian and I made, but somebody that a local child had made perhaps. And you want to know, are they edible? Donna, guinea fowl are edible. Whether you would choose to eat one or not, I'm not sure. In some parts of the world, in some of the lodges I've worked, they serve guinea fowl as something of a delicacy. And to my mind, it tastes not dissimilar from a sort of, if you can think of a sisal rope soaked in apricot sauce. with a bit of chicken stock and perhaps a slight gamey, entraily taste. To my mind, that is what a guinea fowl tastes like. There are many who would disagree vehemently with me and tell you that they were quite delicious. There are others who will give you the recipe, and I think I've given this recipe before, for guinea fowl, where what you do is you take a pot, big three-legged steel pot, iron pot, fill it with the veggies and things, and delicious stewing veggies and root vegetables. Then you put a brick in the pot, and you put the guinea fowl in the pot too. And you boil that up for about 2 days. And then at the end of 2 days, you take the brick and the guinea fowl out of the pot, and you throw the guinea fowl away and consume the brick with the vegetables. Hello, John boy. I knew somebody was going to come up with a sarky comment about our rope and our stuck incident yesterday. Thank you, John boy, for reminding me. For those of you who didn't see, I managed to get Jiga stuck yesterday, and were pushed out by two kind ladies. Luckily, it is 2015, so I didn't feel entirely emasculated by the process, just a little bit. John boy, I'm not sure that this would be powerful enough to haul out the Land Rover, especially with the amazing skill that I have of getting very stuck very hard, so probably not. And then another question about strangling plants. Dave, you want to know if there are any plants or weeds that stop plants from growing, that might cut off the circulation of other plants. Dave, the most obvious one is the fig tree. We have lots of strangler figs. The most common one here is something called Ficus stillmanii, and it will grow in dead trees, especially dead leadwoods, but it will also grow in other trees and eventually strangle them to death. In terms of creepers that sort of overwhelm trees, no, not so much. There are lots of creepers that grow up into trees, but nothing that tends to cause much strangulation. There are a couple of alien invasive plants like the triffid weed or Chromalina odorata, and that will form very thick stands that will choke out the native vegetation. Yeah, nice question. Thanks, Dave. So we're into the area where we heard the monkey's alarm calling a little earlier, but I don't see anything just yet. Hello, John in Los Angeles. Another fairly common question people have around here about the snakes. Have I ever seen a tafel or a black mamba or any other venomous snakes about the place? John, I've seen lots of them. And I've caught some of them too. And there's a beautiful waterbuck bull in front of us. So, John, I'll get back to your snake question now. He, like most of the things Brian and I have tried to look at today, is taking flight. So just while we move gently up towards him, I'm just going to stop here. No, I'm not. Now, we've spoken a lot about smell. I can smell that waterbuck. Can you smell him, Brian? You've got a very musky smell, and there's some cows off to the right. It's a really lovely smell. We'll just stop here and see if they don't relax a bit with us. So, John, in California, Los Angeles, yes, plenty of snakes out here, but they're not as terrifying as you think they are. They really will move away far more often than they will do anything like take a strike at you. I've caught puff adders. They're very slow. I've caught cobras when I've had to. I don't, I'm not a snake wrangler or a herpetologist by any stretch. There's a calf being chased by a young bull. But, they're just not, the snakes are not out here to get us. It's really a waste of their venom to try and bite us. They don't bite us because they want to eat us. They bite us because we make them afraid sometimes. And so puff adders will always warn you before they strike. A cobra will always warn you before it strikes. A mamba tends to be more easily threatened, so I wouldn't try and catch one because I'm not a trained snake handler. But I know people who are well-trained snake handlers who will happily catch a mamba and do so without too much fear. Yes, you've got to be very careful, of course. But the chances of being bitten at random, actually, John, there are greater chances of you being struck by lightning than there are of being bitten by a snake out here. So I've never met anybody who's been struck by lightning. And I've also, likewise, I don't think I've ever met anybody who's been seriously bitten by a snake. I know a few people who were being a bit stupid when trying to catch them and have been nipped by snakes they didn't think were that venomous. Nobody's died. But it's really unlikely that you can be bitten by a snake. There was one fellow who's a good friend and he's a real character, and he on one New Year's Eve was obviously a few too many sheets to the wind, and in a reserve not far from here he found what is a stiletto snake, which is quite a nasty snake. It's got a nasty cytotoxic venom, and he mistook it for a blind snake, which of course is totally harmless. He tried to pick it up, and if this thing has got little fangs, the stiletto snake has little fangs that stick out the side of its mouth, and it just nipped him on the end of his finger. And he said the pain was utterly immediate and utterly excruciating, and he knew that he'd made a mistake, so they rushed him off to hospital, where he spent 3 days convalescing I think he was in intensive care for a while, mainly because they just didn't want to have to chop off his finger. That was the big issue when you get bitten by a snake like that, is that your flesh starts to rot almost immediately. That's what the proteins in the venom does to you, and it doesn't take very much, obviously. But he's fine. He didn't lose his finger, and while many people would like to tell the war stories of when they'd been bitten by a snake and survived, he tries to keep the story very under wraps, of course, because it was his own gormless, slightly drunken stupidity that had him bitten by the black stiletto snake circa 2012-2013 New Year's Eve. So, John in California, unless you're trying to pick up a stiletto snake after 37 beers, you'll be okay. Hello, Elizabeth in Minneapolis. First time I've had this question out here, and it's a good one. Why do lions avoid waterbuck because of that musky smell? Elizabeth, no, I don't believe they do. They will eat. I've seen them eating waterbuck. I've also seen them eating the most foul, rancid, disgusting, rotting buffalo and giraffe meat that's been sat in the sun festering for a week. So they don't worry too much about it. Maybe if given the choice between that and something else, they might not go for it. But I suspect that the smell's function is more a following thing, and possibly also a territorial thing. Humans, though, if you want to eat waterbuck, you have to skin them very carefully because they can taint the meat quite badly. That's lovely. They're all disappearing off Djuma to another reserve, which is a bit sad. Anyway. Hello, Gilly in Wisconsin. Gilly, you have read the book that I wrote. Thank you for doing that. It's called A Year in the Wild. For those of you who haven't read it, I'll go and buy it immediately on Amazon. I think the British site, COUK. Gilly, for those of you who don't know, it's a light and fun book about two brothers who go and work at a 5-star lodge in and around this general vicinity, and it's about the sort of behind the scenes things that go on at those lodges. Gilly, I am much more like the more sarcastic brother Angus. That's sort of me at my most dark, I suppose. And there's a lovely account of, well, I think it's quite a lovely account of a dog in the book called Trubshaw. And Trubshaw allowed me to use his real name. He sadly died last year. He was a magnificent Staffordshire Bull Terrier with the brain of a stone and the heart of gold. Magnificent animal. Sadly passed on into retirement in the Eastern Cape, is where he lived out his years. Thank you, Gilly, for that little marketing push. Marianne, you've made an interesting comment that apparently there's something called a kudzu vine in the US that strangles trees. And I thought there was something like that over there. We definitely don't get it here. There are no vines that strangle trees here. And then a question about our guinea fowl and whether what we do. Them going about the rut. And for those of you who have just joined us, perhaps you're not aware that the impala go through a very tumultuous time during April and May, when they go through what we call the rut, where they fight over females and territories, and then at the end of May they mate. Well, the lucky ones mate, the others knock about on the fringes, bachelor groups, which is the sort of stable arrangement when they aren't in the rut. That's a 2-year-old there. You can just see their horns. They're all probably from the same cohort. Just the horns that will turn once more as he goes into his, well, he's about to be 2. He'll be 2 in November. And the one just coming onto the road there, you can see is a yearling. That would have been born, well, no, just over a year, sorry. The other thing you'll see, interestingly, if you look behind their tails, Brian, I don't know if you can see any of the big ones who are shaking their tails about. They, slightly crude, but what happens during the rut is that their testicles drop down because of the increased testosterone, and you can see now that the rut is over because that process is reversed. So when they wag their tails, you can't actually see the scrotum behind the tails, and it's quite clever. It's a waste for them to be have their testicles functioning unless they actually need them to be. And so for the part of the year that they don't use them, they sort of disappear and almost go internal, and then they drop again when the rut comes and the testosterone levels increase. So you can see 3 different ages there. You've got that one there who's a fully mature ram. You've got the little sort of horny ones there behind with the horns that almost meet in the middle without any twists. And they were born not November 2014, but they would have been born November 2013, and the one before that, November 2012, with just that almost two turns. in the horns. Right, we'll leave these rather splendid fellows. They will try and stay out in the open on a windy day like today. You can see that the light has not, sorry, I've given them a huge fright. The light has not become warm like it does on most of these of our gorgeous winter mornings. These cloudy days are, I'd say we have them once every 3 or 4 weeks, hey Brian? And the rest of the time it's crystal skies and gorgeous golden light all the time, which is just wonderful. Now I'm just going to stop up here because there's another vehicle coming, and we're going to go across to Scott, and he's just doing some exploring, and we'll see you a little bit later.
Welcome back, everyone, and I'm happy to hear that you all know how to make rope now, thanks to James. In case you do ever find yourself stuck in the wilderness in the need of a rope. Liam and myself have been exploring a few roads that have yet to be driven this morning in the hope that we may find some new information or clues as to where the animals may be hiding, but haven't been hugely successful. And all that I've really noticed, which is quite interesting though, is that there seems to be a lot more impala here on Djuma than there were 2 weeks ago. And that's great news, because if there's a lot of impala around, it means that the predators here have got a lot of food available to them. We are slowly making our way back towards the Nkuhuma Pride of Line. I am 99% sure that they are going to be fast asleep, but if some of you have just joined the show more recently, it'll be a great opportunity to show you how ridiculously full-bellied they are. It looks like they've been inflated. They're about to pop, it appears, after a very successful night hunting. We're not sure what they caught, but they certainly have made a kill of a substantial size, because all of the Pride members appear to have eaten their full. Well, good morning, Purple Rain, and welcome on board with us. Purple Rain is interested to know, where have all the monkeys gone? Well, that's a good question. We did see a troop yesterday afternoon. It was the first animal that I got to share with you after getting back from leave. So they are still about, but like a lot of the animals here, just because we aren't seeing them, it doesn't mean that they're not here. It just means we're not looking in the right places. And that goes for a lot of the small animals. Animals like elephant, for example, which are quite easy to see tracks of. We are fairly confident there are no elephants on the property, and I haven't even seen any old elephant tracks since I've been driving around yesterday or today. But the vervet monkey troops will certainly still be here, but just moving in areas where we are not. Similar question through from Deborah in Kentucky. Morning, Deborah, and thanks for sending your question through. Deborah would like to know, where have all the jackal gone? Now, just like the monkeys, they, I'm sure, are still here, but we just aren't seeing them because we may not be looking in the right places. But there's a pair of side-striped jackal that appear to have made the quarantine clearings their home in the last few months, and I'm told that there have been a few sightings of them within the week. So sadly you must have just been missing those shows, Deborah, and you're going to have to try and find time to tune into more of the shows if you don't want to miss out on anything. But I did drive through the quarantine clearings, well, a portion of them this morning, and there was no sign of the side-striped jackal. There aren't huge populations of jackal within the Sabi Sands, so it's not an animal that you see very commonly, even at the best of times. So that will also be a contributing factor to weigh up or add into your question. There simply aren't high populations of jackal here, and that's possibly due to the high predator density of other animals that will outcompete or even kill jackal, like lion and leopard, even jackal. And because of those high populations of other apex predators, there's not too much room for jackal out here. Whereas in other wilderness destinations you may find higher populations of jackal, and not only higher populations but different populations, in that here we have the side-striped jackal, which is more common in the Sabi Sands than the black-backed, but that is quite unusual, and usually the black-backed jackal is more highly populated and widespread throughout southern Africa than the side-striped, so we're quite lucky in that we do get the rarer of the two here. You also hear, but not very commonly, but they certainly also do occur in the Sabi Sands. Okay, well, we're just a few meters away from where we left the Nkuhuma Pride, so it'll be interesting to see. Well, it won't be interesting to see because I'm almost 90% sure they will be here, but there's only one way to find out, so let's go and have a look. Well, here we are, and as you can see, this is a pride of a very well-fed lion. I still can't work out what it is they possibly fed on. Maybe a buffalo, but it would be an incredible feat for them to be able to finish off a fully grown buffalo bull in just one sitting. But the area that they did head into last night was very thick, and it would be difficult to go back in there and investigate as to what exactly they managed to catch. Either way though, great that they had a successful evening, and for the next 24 hours we can expect fairly lethargic lions, and understandably so. You wouldn't want to be running around or being too active with bellies that are extended to this degree. What we can hope for though this afternoon on the sunset safari is for them to head back to the Djuma waterhole to drink, and there is even a chance that they could head back during the course of the day, so it may be worth tuning into the Djuma waterhole camera between drives, as we may get one or two heading back to continue drinking. They did have a little drink earlier this morning. Sadly, we got you just after they had finished drinking and followed them to this place where we can see them relaxing now. Well, good morning, Jimmerlin in Oklahoma, and thanks for sending your question through. Jimmerlin has noticed that these lion have hardly even batted an eyelid as we arrived and are not concerned of our presence at all. And would that be the case with all lion, or if we were to drive into an area where lion or leopard are not accustomed to vehicles, what kind of response could we expect to see? Now, I'm not sure what these lion have seen. I can see two of them have picked up their heads. There is a very vague chance they may try and catch something if it comes close enough to them, despite having full bellies. So we just must be aware of that. They are highly opportunistic. But to continue with Jimmerlin's question, if you come across lion or leopard that are not used to vehicles in very remote wilderness areas where they have not been exposed to vehicles and understood that we don't want to harm them, we just want to view them, typically they will run away. That will be animals' first decision when seeing humans that they are not happy with. By running away, they ensure that they don't have to get into a confrontation, and that is the safest possible option for them. So that is typically the behavior you'll see with unhabituated animals, lion, leopard, even elephants and rhino and buffalo. But in the same breath, there is that same small chance that because they do fear us, if they do feel cornered or threatened to a point where running is not an option, they may attack the vehicle or charge at the vehicle to chase us off. So those are the two potential outcomes that you will get with animals that are not used to vehicles, but 90% of the time, running away will be their first option. Been so good to have you on board with us. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and a very big thank you from myself for following us, and also a big thanks to VM, who was on camera with me this morning, and to Tara and Nikki, who are in the final control room. It's been a great day, and James has found something really exciting for you, so I hope you enjoy the rest of the show with James. We'll see you a bit later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Djuma. We just come across to the Arathusa waterhole, not because of any skill on my part at all, but because you very kind people have been watching the camera here and saw that they had come down, and so we came across from basically the other side of the reserve to see these elephants. I haven't seen elephants for a few days, and so it's just a real wonder to close off this morning's game drive with a stunning herd of elephants here. They're all around, you can see them there. There are a few just to our right here, just below the bank, which is quite fun. Look at that, they're quite close by. That's only about 20 meters away. Beautiful. And they've all just done that sort of classic elephant thing, where they were drinking, and one of the cows, the matriarch, who I think is the one that you can just about see off far left of your screen, she gave the signal, a kind of low rumble, and they all stopped drinking and moved off. And I suspect these ones that are still drinking that we were just looking at are teenagers who perhaps will just stay on the fringes of the herd for now. They're definitely, the youngsters here who are having their drink are very calm with us. But that cow walking towards us with her big tusks is definitely having a bit of a look. She's interested in probably instilling a bit of discipline. Now, you might think that these elephants would never be able to get up to where we are. That is not the case. They are remarkably agile for their size. Fine. Please excuse my bonce getting in the way of the camera. She's a stunning old cow, that. And by old cow, I don't mean it in the derogatory sense at all. They're smelling us. Definitely having a big smell of us and just checking what we want. It's almost like she's come to check on these youngsters who are remaining at the waterhole. She's watching us very carefully. And the youngster, you can just see the youngster's trunk peeping up from behind, smelling us, because the wind is coming from directly behind us and blowing straight onto their faces. Ryan, can you see the one just in front there? No, it's not particularly beautiful scenery, but that one has just been sort of resting his foot on the, like a... Isn't that wonderful? That's the youngster just next to us who's yelling like that, probably in response to the cow that's come up to give him a hard time. I think that one in front of us probably looks like a young bull. Young bull who's just coming to check us out. His little wet boots. Looks like he's got himself a pair of black boots. And now he's coming to show us how immensely tough he is. But then he might think better of it and walk off. Now that's a steep bank that elephant is climbing down. That's a steep bank that you and I would have to be pretty careful about going down, and the elephant just as nimble as we are. That's really nice to see. So often when I was in the bush and I perhaps came across some elephants and I was on some high ground, I'd think, well, no, this is fine, I'll be totally safe up here. They are very nimble. They might not be the most graceful when they're climbing about like that, but they're certainly very nimble. So we've only got 2 minutes left with you, and so we're just going to enjoy these elephants for the next 2 minutes. I think even that bank might present too much of a challenge for an elephant. Thank you for some wonderful questions, some very humorous questions from many of you today, and that's always good fun, especially on a quiet drive. Well, it's not so quiet now, but it was a bit quiet for us. Thank you to Brian for making his beautiful rope today. It was good filming with Brian. I think I've only been with him 3 times. Old Scott and Viam on the other vehicle who found the lions, and of course a big thank you to the XX chromosomes sitting off in the final control. They do a remarkable job. But mostly thank you to all of you for your contributions, your questions, and your comments. And I think I've probably said enough now. Look at the little baby climbing up. That's that baby that we see quite often with the sort of funny shape, funny skin, and that's her mother. We've spent quite a lot of time with her mother before and the baby. And she's lactating very heavily. And she's just very wary of us today. Now, I have been around her. I've been around her when she's been completely chilled with us. And she's quite wary at the moment. There she goes. So thanks, everybody. It's been a wonderful morning. Strange weather that we're having. But we will see you in the afternoon. Please join us. Please tell all your friends to join us. And we'll see you later on this blustery winter's day. Thanks a lot.